So my name's Andrew Craddock. I started my career as a software developer working on mainframe technologies, and I joined British Airways in 1988 as a graduate in biology. So absolutely nothing to do with IT, but back in the 80s, for those of you that were around back then, if you could spell IT and you had a degree in anything, then you had a career assured in that space. So that's where I started, and I sort of graduated through the ranks to become a project manager. And while I was a project manager in 1997, so still a pretty long time ago, I came across DSDM, and I'll tell you more about my experiences on that shortly. In 2001, I left British Airways and started a career as a freelance agile advocate, I'd guess you'd say, sort of helping other organisations adopt DSDM and Scrum and other agile approaches, and that's what I've been doing ever since. Also, around the same time, I joined the board of the DSDM consortium, so I've been working with the DSDM consortium now for nearly 15 years, and for most of that time I've been responsible for the DSDM method itself. So not just me, I lead a team of talented agile specialists with bags of experience, but we're responsible collectively for the way DSDM has evolved since the mid-2000s, really. Okay, so let's move on into the presentation. So I'm going to talk about MoSCoW prioritization. So MoSCoW prioritization was one of the almost founding techniques, founding practices of DSDM right back in 1994 when it was first created. The consortium was made up of a number of organisations who got together really to try and solve some of the problems that were out there using RAD, Rapid Application Development, so a precursor to Agile, if you like. And one of those companies was Oracle. One of the people who worked for Oracle, a guy called Di Clegg, invented MoSCoW prioritization, and it was donated to part of the intellectual property of DSDM. It has since moved beyond that and is used quite widely elsewhere now, but I guess our claim to fame is we invented it. So what I want to do, I want to go through MoSCoW prioritization. It is understood in a basic way by lots and lots of people, but the fine detail of what really makes it work quite often isn't properly understood. So what I want to do is to spend some time presenting DSDM in all its glory, hopefully so that you guys here will understand it fully by the time I've got to the end of my time. I'm going to talk about how important it is to respect the technique itself and the way it works, because if you start straying from the word, if you like, then you will start having problems with MoSCoW. It doesn't work unless you apply it properly. And finally, I want to give you a bit of ammunition to sell MoSCoW prioritization to business sponsors and people like that who really ought to get it. Yeah, and there'll be a bit of ammunition in this presentation for you to do that. Having done that, hopefully you'll then be able to reap the rewards on well-controlled projects that deliver what they need to deliver when they're expected to deliver. And I should say that DSDM and the combination of MoSCoW prioritization and time boxing, which is another topic that maybe you want to hear about over incoming sessions, the combination of MoSCoW and time boxing is what makes DSDM sing, and it transformed my life. And this is not an exaggeration. As a project manager at British Airways, it transformed my life. Yeah, all my projects up to the point of using DSDM were late and over budget. Every last one. And it wasn't just me, it was every single project manager at British Airways had nearly all of their projects late and over budget. Yeah. Now, what do I mean by that? What I mean by that is later than initially intended and costing more than initially promised. That's what I mean. So I'll finish off by saying that bit of the story by saying that actually As a project manager at British Airways, before DSDM, I had a 100% on time, on budget delivery track record. And yet all my projects were later than expected and cost more than expected. How does that work? It works because we could play a game. I knew that I could walk into a steering committee meeting 1 month before the due end of the project and say, okay, this is what's happened. I need more budget and more time to finish things off, otherwise it won't be done. It's your choice, steering committee, to give me more time and more budget, or we could call it a day if you like. Yeah? Every time, every time, without fail, I got the extension. I got more money, I got more time to deliver. Brilliant. After a 1 hour meeting, I walk out, I'm on time and on budget again. Right? That's the way it worked. It's a game. Yeah? Didn't fool anybody other than the IT department. Business people still thinking, hang on, this is still 3 months after you said we'd be getting it. It still cost me, £300,000 more than you said it was going to cost. Right? What I'm talking about here, in terms of transforming my life, is getting to the point where the projects I was delivering were on original time frame and original budget. No change. Yeah, and that's done through MoSCoW Prioritisation and time boxing. What's more, my life not only had better results in the project context, it was a lot less stressful getting it there as well. So, how does it work? Well, I want to start off with one of the fundamental sort of paradigm shifts, one of the things that people just need to get their head round if this is to work. So traditional projects, we go through a process of defining and agreeing a set of requirements. Yeah, so we do that up front. We then go through a process of designing a solution to meet those requirements, estimating how long it's going to take us to implement those requirements, and so on. Yeah? And we make promises on the back of that based on those estimates. As the project proceeds, things happen. To use an Americanism, shit happens. Yeah? It just does on projects. Things do not stay the same. The world changes, requirements change, the need changes. Your understanding of what you're trying to achieve changes. The people involved change. Yeah? So much is about change and managing change. Typically, in a traditional project, what we will do is we will soldier on trying to deliver everything. And what happens is time and cost go out. Yeah? We spend more, we take longer. The DSDM approach is different. The DSDM approach says we should do some work up front. We should understand fundamentally what it is we're trying to achieve. And then we make some promises around timescales and budgets, yeah, based on those estimates. Sounds pretty similar so far, right? And that's what we do. We make those promises, and then as we go through our project, as that change happens around us, instead of carrying on trying to deliver everything, we actually flex the features. Instead of allowing time and cost to flex, we flex the features. In order to protect our timescale and our budget, we will deliver a bit less. Yeah? Incrementally, we'll deliver less as more and more of this change happens. So, I'll tell you more about that in a moment. But as I said, it's the two techniques of MoSCoW and time boxing that come together to make this work. Briefly, what time boxing is essentially just breaking our project up into chunks, small chunks. Yeah, maybe 2 weeks, 2, 3, 4 weeks, 4 weeks at the most, I'd say. Yeah, we break it up into those sorts of chunks, and then we deliver something of tangible, demonstrable value at the end of every one of those time boxes. DSDM calls it a time box. Scrum calls it a sprint. XP calls it an iteration. Yeah? Doesn't matter what you call it. Fundamentally, it's the same thing. It's this chunk of time, a box of time that lasts 2 to 4 weeks. So that is the essence of control. Every 2 to 4 weeks, we understand what it is we're delivering. We can tell whether we're on track or not, and we control things accordingly by working on the scope. So, another thing that is needed, and people really need to get this, yeah, and to a certain extent, I'm sure I'm preaching to the choir here. Yeah, a lot of you will understand this, but it's amazing how many people, perhaps in more senior positions, in business positions, quite often don't get this. So what sorts of things do we need? We need to establish a clear business vision for our project. Sounds fairly straightforward, but it is amazing using traditional approaches like a waterfall approach, how quickly the people working on the project lose sight of the vision. I've done a lot of training in the past, and I play a bit of a game when I've got development teams in a room. Yeah, I'll ask them, what are you doing on this project? This is talking about developers and testers here. What are you doing on this project? Oh, well, I'm writing code or testing a product that's being built. Okay, right, so that's what you do on a day-to-day basis. You're writing code. What are you here for, though? Well, I'm here to build software. Yeah, okay, so you're here to build software, that's fine, but what are you trying to achieve? Yeah, and I play this game, yeah, and eventually somebody might twig that they're here to solve a business problem, to help solve a business problem. Yeah, quite often they don't, and I will actually say, oh, so you don't think you're here to help solve a business problem, to make the company more successful, more profitable, whatever it might be? Yeah. Well, yeah, of course I'm here to do that. That's why I'm employed. Yeah, well, kind of. Yeah. So the most important thing is to understand what it is we're trying to achieve in a project. Understand that vision. Because if we understand a vision, have a clear vision, everybody can align what they're doing and judge whether what they're doing is helping to achieve that vision or not. Yeah? So prioritization needs to be done in that context. There's no point in just having arbitrary priorities. If you can't anchor them in reality of a vision, you're going to struggle. Next one is remembering the Pareto principle, the 80-20 rule. Yeah? 80% of the value will come from 20% of what we deliver in a project. How true that is with times of austerity now, I'm not so sure. Yeah, I think things have been cut to the bone, but it used to be the case, certainly. Back in the early 2000s, the Standish Group did a survey about the features of software delivered by projects and how much they were used. Yeah, they found 7% of the features were always used, 13% often, 16% sometimes, another 16% rarely, and 45% never used. Yeah, right, I hear you think. Yeah, but I've actually, going back right to the beginning of my career as a software developer, I went over to have a conversation with some business people about something they wanted this big old system that we had to do. So I listened to what their requirements were, took copious notes, all that sort of thing, went back to the office, fished out the relevant code modules and that sort of stuff, started looking at it. And I found that the requirements that they had put to me, things they wanted the system to do, it already did. Needed one or two little tweaks, but fundamentally, the functionality was already in the software. Yep. This is old mainframe technology days. You just didn't know the 3-letter code to type in to get that transaction. Yeah, to get into that transaction, get into that screen. So I put all the code back away again, went back over the following day and said, right, I've done that. All you need to do is type this 3-letter code in the test system and you'll see, so have a look at that. Is that sort of what you're after? No, I didn't. I went back and told them it was already there, but could have been the opportunity for a rapid promotion. So what that said is, if that feature was there that had never been used, it was built, somebody had the foresight, maybe, to build it in 7 or 8 years previously when the software was built, and then forgot it was there. So think business value is the next one. Yeah? And what we need to think here is the overall value, not just how important it is to me as a stakeholder, my little bit, Yeah, I've worked on projects that span sort of multiple business departments. All of them have their own agendas, their own view about what's important, what isn't, and everything else. It's really important in a project context to take that back to the greater good. Yeah, I know that's really important to you, but in the grand scheme of things, this thing over here has got to be considered more important. Yeah, so that sort of whole business view is important. And then we prioritise. So this is where we're getting into the MoSCoW prioritisation bit. We have our requirements, we prioritise those. We prioritise them early to help shape budgets and plans. Yeah, so we understand what the requirements are, help shape a business case. I'll talk more about that in a minute. We prioritise often. Yeah, we do it at the outset. We have a baseline at that point. Great, we need that. Yeah, but what we will then do is we will revisit that prioritisation every 2 or 3 weeks. And we're going to be asking ourselves a question, is the next most important things on the list that we're going to work on still the next most important things? Yeah? Or has something changed that will alter that priority? We need to be proactive in this process. Don't be afraid to challenge. Quite often people in project organisations, and the reason for this is it's been drilled into us for so long, we think we're here to serve. Yeah, we're here to fulfill the whim of the business people, the sponsors, whoever. Yeah? If we work for a company, and I made this point when I worked for British Airways, and I got the "I'm the customer, I'll tell you what to do" type argument from somebody. I said, well, hey, this is just as much my company as it is your company. Yeah? I work here too. I'm as invested in the success of this company as you are. Yeah? Let's talk about it. Yeah, I challenged, and that was an argue that it couldn't be refuted. Yeah, I had an opinion. Yeah, and sometimes I won. My opinion won. Sometimes my colleagues' opinions won. Yeah, it's all about the debate, not being afraid to have the debate. So prioritisation needs to be collaborative. Everybody needs to have their say. And it doesn't matter how big your hat is, yeah? Everybody needs to contribute to this sort of prioritisation. Finally, consider as you go through a simple feature-by-feature return on investment. Yep, so we'll justify a project. We're going to go and spend £1 million for £2 million reward every year or whatever. Yeah, fine, brilliant. That justifies a project. Feature by feature, we need to be asking ourselves, what value does that feature have? How does that contribute to the overall success, to the overall business case that we have? And it doesn't need to be big and complex and involved. Yeah, it just needs an opinion. Yeah, a few people to think about it as we go through. So let's talk about MoSCoW and what it means. So the first tip I have for you is respect the definitions of MoSCoW. Yeah, so let's have a look at what those are. First of all, it stands for the things we must have, should have, could have, and won't have this time. Yeah, that's the definition of MoSCoW. The terms, definition of the terms. So let's see what those mean. So, first of all, what is a must? A must forms part of the minimum usable subset. Minimum usable subset. Yeah? Without this requirement being met, the product, the solution, will be unusable, unworkable. Yeah? So we're not talking about, the Spice Girls stuff here. It's not what I want, what I really, really want. That's what a must-have is. The only definition of a must-have is if that one requirement isn't addressed, the whole project will fail outright. That's the definition of a must-have. The whole project will fail outright. The really important things, the things that have real value, we really want it because it's going to be valuable, they come into the should-haves. Should-haves are things for which there is a workaround. That workaround might be difficult, it might be costly, but there is a workaround. Maybe you're going to need to go and recruit 20 more people into a help centre, a call centre or something like that, if we don't have this feature in the software. Yeah, I mean, you look at that and say, well, there's no way we could recruit 20 people into a telephone centre or whatever, call centre. We can't do that. That would blow the business case. Yep, sure, it would. So let's make that the most important should have then. What you can't deny is if everything else was delivered and the only workaround required you to go and get 20 people into the call centre, would you throw the project away? If you were still going to get your £2 million a year benefit. All right, you might have to pay £100,000 or a couple £100,000 of that back in terms of increased headcount in your call centre, but would you throw the project away on that basis? Probably not, if you're rational about it. Yeah, so what we're talking about here are things that you expect to deliver, expect to have in the solution. The solution might be considered pretty rubbish if it wasn't there, sure. Yeah, but it's not a must-have, it's a should-have. What we do with the should-haves is we de-scope those as a last resort to keep a project on track. Could-have requirements are next. So could-haves are requirements for which the workarounds are easy or cheap. Yeah, it's not going to have a big impact. Yeah, it might take us a few seconds longer to do something on a transactional basis or something like that, but it isn't going to jeopardize the project in any way, shape or form. Yeah, so we can de-scope those without causing significant problems. The last one are the won't-haves. Won't have this time. Yeah, so they're out of scope this time around. They may be important, they may even be critical to a project, yeah, but what we're saying is at this point in time, we can live without it. Yeah, so shortly after I went freelance, I started working with an insurer. Yeah, they were building or had built the basics of a new insurance sort of management system. And when they built it, all the features, the functionality associated with renewing an insurance policy were left out of the early versions. Yeah. You talk to people in the insurance industry, they'll tell you how important renewal is, the renewal processes are and that sort of thing to retain customers and all this sort of thing. Undoubtedly, a vital part of a system. And sure, if you had a computer system where you couldn't process renewals, maybe you would consider that was a must-have. That would be enough to cause our project to fail outright. But they knew, because they sold annual policies, they knew they could sell their first policy in the summer of whatever year it was, and they wouldn't need to renew it until the summer of the following year. Yeah. So we won't have it this time. We'll do it later. Yeah. So that's what won't have means. I talk to some people and say, won't have is very strong, very negative. People don't like that. Let's soften it a bit. So let's call it would like to have. No, don't mess. Yeah, if you make it a would like to have, what does that mean? What message does that give? Yeah, it gives to the people who are doing this prioritization, you might just get this. You might, if you're really lucky, you might get it. No, you're not going to get it. It's out of scope, right? If it's out of scope, let's be clear about it. It's a won't have. So that's your first tip. Look at those and look at those definitions, understand those definitions. And if you're a project manager and you're sort of trying to run your project using this type of technique, don't cave in, don't give way to this, to some politically influential person that says, well, I want that to be a must-have. Yeah. Have the argument. Yeah. Occasionally, you can't do anything. You've got a career to protect after all, right? So sometimes you end up with people who you can't say no to. Yeah. But be clear what the consequences are. Next, tip number 2, respect the effort guidelines associated with this. So this is the second thing that allows DSDM to work properly. So what are these effort guidelines? Well, the first one is that typically no more than 60% of our total effort should be given over to must-have requirements. no more than 60% of the estimated effort on the project should be associated with must-have requirements. Now, if you think about what I said the definition of a must-have requirement was, if we don't deliver it, the whole project will fail outright, it's going to be pretty easy to do this, right? Because most projects these days are actually system enhancements. They're not greenfield. And you know what? Your business is running as it is today. Yeah, before we do the enhancements. So it wouldn't actually surprise me going into an enhancement type project if none of the requirements were must-haves. It's conceivable. Yeah. If you're going into, I don't know, a new line of business or something like that, sure, some of them will be must-haves. But 60%, more than 60%, yeah, I would argue that's unusual. Yeah, so note, there's no minimum here. Sometimes I've heard people talk about the 60-20-20 rule that sort of suggests we must have 60% must-haves and 20% should-haves and 20% could-haves. Nonsense. That isn't what the guidance says. It's not what it says in the handbook. The handbook says no more than 60%. And if you only had 10%, fantastic. Yeah, I'll tell you why it's fantastic in a moment. But before I do that, the second one is that typically somewhere around 20% of the effort should be associated with could-have requirements. Yeah, those are the things, remember, that if they didn't get delivered, it wouldn't matter too much. It wouldn't have a particularly big impact on the success of a project. What's in the middle, the rest, do the maths on a project-by-project basis. Yeah, don't go for 20%, do the maths. If you've only got 10% must-have requirements, you've managed to reserve 20% as could-haves, 70% should-haves. Fantastic. Why is that fantastic? That's fantastic because we know where we need to focus initially. That's on the 30% of stuff which would cause the project to fail outright. Thereafter, we can look at every single requirement and say, which of these, I don't know, 40 requirements that we've got left is the most important? Yeah? What do we want to do in the next time box or the next sprint or whatever it is? Because that's what we'll do. So the more you have in the should-have pot, the more control the business has, the people who are doing the prioritization have over the product that evolves. So what's in those percentages is all about contingency. So let's think about contingency. Traditional contingency, the sort of contingency that has been associated with projects since projects came into existence, has typically been time and effort based. Yeah? So we'll come up with some estimates for how long we think the project's going to take, what effort is needed, therefore what cost, and then we'll add a bucket at the end, some contingency at the end, 20%, whatever it might be, yeah, to say, you know, so when things go wrong, as I explained they always do, yeah, we've got some slack, yeah, we've got this contingency pot that we can use. But that's wasteful because of Parkinson's law. Parkinson's law says that work expands to fill the time available. It just does. Yeah. You're all PMs here, or I'm guessing you're all PMs as it's a PMI event. When was the last time you didn't use all the contingency that you had available to you as a project manager? When was the last time you didn't use your contingency? Can you think of the time? Can anybody think of a time at all when they didn't use all their contingency? Anybody brave enough to put their hand up? No. Yes. When was it, sir?
2007 to 2008.
Right. So quite a while ago then. And was that the only example you can think of?
It's the one that stands out.
Yeah. Yeah, I have one example as well in my time at British Airways, just one, and it was an infrastructure project. Yeah, so.
Good one actually. It was implementation of CRM, but to get to the project that it was, we take some sponsors, some stakeholders out of it, and we didn't have to use it. So the scope was the same, just not distributed to everybody. It should be.
Right. Okay. So what you did there is you got everybody bought into and collaborating around the project. Yeah. Yeah, that's interestingly is another one of the key things that makes Agile work. Actually, some of these things, you can apply them to traditional project contexts and they help as well. Yeah. So that's one thing. Yeah, generally speaking, yeah, people can think of maybe an example, but generally speaking, you use all your contingency because work expands to fill the time available. It's also difficult to control. So again, probably preaching to the choir, but you guys probably all know how you should calculate your contingency, and it should be based on your broken down task plan and all this sort of thing. Your contingency will vary from task to task and all this sort of thing, and then you add it all up and you work out how much contingency you need. Yeah, that's the theory. Yeah, and then you monitor, control, and report that at the task level as well. Yeah, right. Who's got the time to do that? And we know, because we live in the world of projects, we know that it doesn't matter how good and detailed our task plan may look on the day we create it, it doesn't last more than days before it all starts changing, right? So all of that effort and contingency calculation is estimates based on estimates based on estimates. Not only is it difficult, it's pretty futile as well, actually. So normally what happens is we go for a bucket. Yeah, well, let's ask for 20% contingency. Yeah. At British Airways, that was refused. Yeah, they were wise to this. You ask for 20% contingency, you'll only use it, so we're not going to give you any. Okay. So how does that work then? Let's go back to my project management textbooks and work out how I now manage a project without any contingency. Well, you can't, can you? Yeah. So what do we start doing? We start hiding it. We pad our estimates to include the contingency. So we're no longer asking for 20% contingency, we've just padded our estimates by 20%. Ha-ha! But that makes it impossible to control now. Yeah? Because we haven't done any of the scientific stuff that's meant to be helping us understand when we might need to use this contingency. Yeah? So, traditional contingency is difficult to deal with. So let's now think about scope-based contingency. Yeah, so what do we mean by scope-based contingency? Well, if we have our must-have requirements, and if they happened to hit that maximum of 60% of the effort, right, then what contingency do we have against delivering something that's viable, something that it will work? It might not be great, it might be rubbish, in fact, but at least it will work. Yeah? What contingency do we have against that? 40% of the overall effort is what you have, absolutely. So, in terms of more traditional thinking around contingency, if you were calculating it the other way, if you said, right, this is let's call it a 100-day project, right? So we've got 60 days of effort given over to our must-have requirements, and we've got 40 days spare, 40 days contingencies, 40 days for the rest. What is your percentage contingency? It's on the slide if you can read it from the back. It's actually 66%. Yeah, because you've got 60 days associated with musts, you've got 40 days of contingency. 40 is 2/3 of 60. Yeah, so you've got 66% contingency. So if you can't deliver your project with 66% contingency, what are you doing? Yeah, it'd be almost, somebody needs shooting, basically, if you can't deliver with that amount of contingency, right? So now let's think about the could-haves. Right? So the could-haves now are those things that if they're not delivered, it's not going to have any significant impact on the project. And we said we should reserve about 20% of the total effort to be associated with those could-have requirements. Do the maths again with our 100-day project. 80 days of musts and shoulds, 20 days of coulds. You've still got 25% contingency, yeah, in that. The contingency works because if we don't deliver any of the could-haves, it doesn't matter very much. Yeah, the project is still good and viable and successful because the things that we haven't delivered doesn't really matter too much. The good thing about this is it works against Parkinson's law. There's no spare time available for work to expand into because every last day of our estimates, yeah, in our requirements, associated with our requirements, is there. It's full. Our pot is full. Yeah? And what we have to do, if something goes wrong, whatever that might be, we have to have a conversation. We have to have a conversation, a collaborative conversation around prioritization with our business sponsors and the like, and say, okay, it's taken us 10 days longer than we expected to deliver what we did so far. So we need to find 10 days of effort in the could have requirements that we can get rid of in order to stay on time and on budget. What 10 days worth of effort is least important to you, business people? Yeah? Usually, it takes a matter of 30 seconds to a minute for them to decide which of the trivial stuff they don't really care about is the least important, right? It's not a difficult conversation, but it's a conversation that gets had. As you go through your project, let's say things start getting really hairy. Yeah, all sorts of big things are happening and causing problems and turbulence on your project. You've already de-scoped all the could-haves. Yeah, so we're 3 or 4, 5 time boxes into our project, whatever it might be. We've already de-scoped all the could-haves. We now have to have a conversation about the stuff that does matter, that does make some sort of difference. But we're used to having the conversation because we've had it every time box for the last 5 time boxes. Now we're having a conversation with those business people saying, okay, sorry guys, this is the reality. We're looking for 10 days effort here. Amongst all these should-haves, where can we find 10 days of effort that is least painful to you? I understand it's painful, but it's least painful. Yeah? What should we de-scope next? Yeah? In order to stick to our time and budget estimates and our promises to deliver. Yeah? That's the conversation you have. So you're always under control. It's based on collaborative, informed decision-making. So it's not just purely, what's the most valuable thing from a business perspective. You're doing that bit of return on investment trade-off. Yeah, because you might be able to say, well, look, you've placed that single requirement above these 3, but those 3 have relatively little effort associated with them. Would you rather have all of those 3 requirements met instead of that 1 requirement? Or would you rather have the 1 requirement? What's most important? They get to think about it. They get to decide, yeah, on a case-by-case basis. So you do that, time box by time box, as things go wrong. And this is one of the big sales points about MoSCoW. Yeah? You guarantee on-time delivery, guarantee, because if you can't do it with 66% contingency, then the project's pretty damn risky, right? If that's the case, yeah? So you shouldn't be making any sort of promises because it's unpromisable, yeah? And the other thing you get is predictability of outcome because you're having those conversations time box by time box. The thing that, all right, business people don't like it if they don't get the features they think they need, right? They just don't like it. That's right and proper that they don't like it. The thing they like even less than not getting what they're expecting is being told at the last minute they're not getting what they're expecting. Yeah. So we're going live with this over the weekend. Oh, by the way, those features aren't there. You'll have to work around them now. Yeah. If you actually have the conversations weeks, maybe even sometimes months out, yeah, it gives them time to adjust, to put those workarounds in place in the most efficient way possible. So I mentioned, as we go through and we do our estimating and that sort of thing, we should have our beaker, if you like, of requirements all the way full. Yeah. So every last hour of every last day is given over to delivering all the requirements, all the musts, all the shoulds, all the coulds. As change happens, that might be change to the business need, change to requirements, change to understanding. Oh, now we've got into the detail of this. It's a lot more tricky than we thought it was going to be. It's going to take us twice as long to build that as we thought. It happens. Yeah. Don't fret it. Yeah. Understand, that change sort of happens. Whatever that change is, you put it into your pot. If you have a must-have requirement that just comes out of the woodwork, yeah, it happens. Yeah, people just didn't remember, didn't think. forgot. Everybody's human, right? We forgot a requirement. Maybe it was so obvious that we didn't think to mention it, that sort of requirement, you know? Yeah. If you unearth one of these and it's a must-have, the whole project will fail unless we put it in place. No problem. We're agile. We can do that. We've got MoSCoW. We can deal with that, right? Let's drop our must-have requirement into the pot. What will happen? It will sink down here with all the other must-haves, and the levels will rise. Yeah. And a could-have gets displaced, and it becomes a won't-have this time. Doesn't mean we won't ever do it. Just means we won't have it this time around. Big point here is that the business people are in the driving seat for this. Yeah, it's not the place of project managers to decide what's most important and what isn't. It's not the place of people building software or building a product, whatever that product might be, to decide. It's up to the people that want it, the people who are going to use it, the people who are investing in the development of that product. Those are the people that need to be deciding what's most important, what's least important, and therefore what can be descoped. My very first project I did, I was a project manager for, in 1997 at British Airways, was what most people would think of as a nightmare project. Yeah, it was using bleeding edge technology. We were using Java in 1997. Yeah. I know it's almost impossible to think back that far. But in 1997, there was no e-commerce at all. The only thing that the World Wide Web was used for was brochureware. There was nothing else in the beginning of 1997. Yeah? We decided we were going to use it for a business application, more than that. This new language of Java had been invented that would allow us to exploit internet-based technologies globally. Yeah? The project that I was running was effectively, at British Airways, the pilots get to bid for the work that they do. Yeah? And the way it works is the most senior person, the person who's worked longest on that particular fleet, for that particular rank, so if you're a captain of a 747 and you're the longest serving captain on the 747 fleet, you bid for the work you want and you get it, whatever it is, yeah, from the pot, you get it. The second longest serving guy can have whatever he wants, or she wants these days. Didn't have any female pilots when I started at British Airways. Yeah. He or she gets what they want unless the top man has chosen it, in which case they can't have it, it's already gone, they'll have to choose something else. And that's the way it worked, okay? And British Airways was going through a process of consolidating its aircraft types. Yeah, so it was, whereas before they had 4 different types of aircraft that were used for flying intercontinental, they were reducing that to 2. Yeah, so that meant with the same schedule to fulfill, the number of pilots for each aircraft type doubled approximately. Yeah, it wasn't quite that simple, but let's say it was. Yeah, so it doubled. And they had a completely manual process for allocating work. And it had to be done in a 24-hour period. And there physically wasn't enough time in the day to use a manual process. So they needed that data electronically so they could process it electronically. And we used this internet-based technology to allow pilots to register their bids wherever they were in the world, yeah, directly into a system at British Airways, so that allocation could be done automatically. That project delivered on time, on budget, with a delighted customer. It's the first time in my years as a project manager at British Airways I delivered on time, on budget, with a delighted customer. Yeah, first time, and it was using bleeding edge technologies. It was rife with risk and everything else. Yeah, just to give you an idea, nobody had even heard of firewalls. Yeah, we discovered these things called firewalls, you know, that we wanted to send because up till then, no data had gone outside of British Airways unless it went in an email or through a very controlled sort of like telegraph system. Yeah, that was the reality. So when we discovered firewalls, that caused us a bit of a headache. How do we get data? how do you make that work then? They've got this thing in the way of us getting data backwards and forwards. Oh, you have to tunnel through the firewall. You have to open ports and ports in a firewall. There we go. Never heard of those before. All the stuff that is just, if you've worked in IT projects, you know this stuff now. Yeah, it's part of the DNA. But, as I said, on time, on budget, delighted customer. Did we deliver all the musts and all the shoulds? Well, we delivered all the musts. Did we deliver all the shoulds? No. Yep, so there was some pain here in the solution we delivered. There were 4 things that didn't get delivered, 4 significant features didn't get delivered. So we said, okay, well, what we can do, we delivered you something on the day you needed it and everything else, but the budget promise and everything else sorted. And the reason he was delighted was, and I put the quote a bit later on actually, and he said to me, I asked him why he was delighted. He said, it's the first time you lot have ever delivered anything when you said you were going to deliver it for the budget that you first asked for. Yeah. First time ever, and I've been working with projects for 12 years, he said. That was his reality, his perception. The fact that I'd run a couple of projects for him that contributed to my 100% on time, on budget delivery record didn't impress him very much, it has to be said, right? This was original timescale, original budget. Anyway, I said, what we can do is I can ask you for some more budget now, if we want to, and we could run a second project or a second phase of this project to build those features that were missing. Yeah, but it's a genuine choice for you now. I'm not coming in at the last minute with a gun saying, give me more time and more money, or we'll call it a day, because that's robbery, isn't it? You wouldn't be allowed to do that elsewhere, extortion, all that sort of stuff. Yeah, this is actually a case of saying, you've got a choice. Do you want those features? In which case, would you like to spend some money, invest in that? And he said, yes, I would. But I've got this other project I want you to run first because it's more important to me. Okay. That was my second DSDM project. That delivered on time, on budget, and delivered all the musts and all the shoulds. Yeah, because we were better at it and it wasn't quite as risky. Yeah. Then I went back to him and said, okay, Pete, those 4 features then. Should we ramp up a phase 2 of that initial project now? And he said, well, you know what? One of those things, I thought I'd have my ear bent every day by the fact that functionality was missing. Nobody's mentioned it. So I was obviously wrong. That's not as important as I thought it was, so we can forget that one. Yeah. This requirement here, actually, I've got a meeting with the trade unions in a couple of weeks' time, might have an impact on that. Yeah, so we won't do anything with that one until we know. As it happens, the meeting you had with the trade unions made that requirement go away. All right, so there we go. There's 2 requirements out of the 4. Third requirement, that's a big deal. Yeah, it's causing pain. I'm hearing about that pain from the people that are running the, the allocation process. Every month I'm hearing about this pain. So I want that feature. And how about this other feature? This final feature, again, hearing a little bit of noise about it, but nothing significant. So we'll leave that one behind as well. So we've got this one feature we won't have a project for that. We'll just run it as a minor enhancement. We did that, ran it in 10 days, minor enhancement, job done. That was fixed. So that's why there was a delighted customer. And I knew he was delighted because he emailed my boss and my boss's boss and said, I want all the projects in my area to use this DSDM thing now because it's fantastic. Yep. So, top tip number 3. Sell MoSCoW to the sponsor of the project and your senior business stakeholders. Invest time and effort in selling this. Yeah? You've got some ammunition now from what we talked about so far. You get real predictability associated with every time box demonstrating what's been delivered, what's contributing to the overall solution, and prioritizing what's left. What are we going to do in the next time box? Get to the end of that time box, demonstrate you've delivered that. What are the priorities of the things that are left? So keep on with that real predictability. And as you go through, burning more time and effort than you expected doing some of the early requirements and that sort of thing, you can ask the question, what do we knock out? What doesn't get delivered in order to respect time and budget? Real predictability. Real choice, not the Hobson's choice. Not oh, look, we're almost finished now and I need an extra 6 weeks for this project and budget for that, otherwise you're not going to get anything. Do you want to spend that money or should we just forget about the $1 million of your money I've already spent? Yeah. Always, always, always people say, yeah, you can have more. Ask for a small enough amount anyway, and you'll always get it. Yeah. And finally, you say to the sponsor, it's your choice. Nobody else is going to be deciding what gets delivered and what doesn't get delivered. You and your people will be deciding. Yep. So you know that for the money you're investing, you will get the maximum value possible out of that. That's one promise you can make. Yeah. So it requires actively engaged business representatives, though. Yeah. Not the project manager, not the PMO, not the IT guys, the business people. Tip number 4, the last one. You want to do plenty of this stuff over here. Yeah? The biggest one there in green is collaboration. Collaboration is at the heart of all agile approaches. Yeah? That's what brings everybody together to deliver the most value that is possible. Yeah, it requires that business focus we talked about, yeah, the business vision. Everybody really understanding where the value is coming from, so that every decision they make on a day-to-day basis on a project, however small, is made in the light of what's most important for achieving that vision. An understanding of requirements and the consequences of whether they get delivered or not. A proper understanding of that, a shared understanding of how important things are. Common sense in coming to decisions, thinking about things properly, being realistic. Working with one client recently, an absolute nightmare, would not get the realism thing at all. Yeah, I was coaching somebody, and I say coaching, it was very distant. It was a sort of training course with some follow-up emails is actually what it was, because I wasn't engaged as a transformation coach there. But he said, right, this is the reality. Is demanding more, the business sponsor is demanding more than we can deliver for the time and budget we've got. So I said, well, you need to go back and you need to explain this. You need to get them to prioritize, this, all the good stuff I've just spoken to you about, right? No, wasn't having any of it. And the final response from the sponsor was, well, you're just going to have to work in dog years then. Yep. Dog years, if that means anything to you. A dog lives, in terms of life, 7 years for every real year, right? So to get old at the same rate we do, yeah, they live 7 times faster, yeah? You're just going to have to work in dog years then. You're going to have to conjure time and budget from nowhere, because I ain't listening, yeah? Nonsense, absolute nonsense. What businesses should be interested in is not the macho, I want stuff, but predictability. What are we going to get? When are we going to get it? So we can plan how to move our business forward. That's what sponsors should be thinking. So we want plenty of those things on the right. Anyway, that's it. That's MoSCoW prioritization. Thank you very much. Any questions? First of all on MoSCoW, but I'm happy to go beyond MoSCoW if you have any.
When you're within a time box,
Yep.
would you advise to fill that with like mush, shoulds and coulds at that level as well, or just hit all the musts in reverse?
Yeah, I would say the latter. Yeah, you can do it either way, to be perfectly honest. But what I would say is, if you're in a situation where you have selected some musts, shoulds and coulds from your list and put them in a time box, and everything goes fantastically well, and you deliver the shoulds and the coulds, yeah, then your next time box happens and things go horribly wrong. You've already used some of your contingencies. That doesn't really seem very smart to me. So what I would do is I would front load your must-haves into the early time boxes, and I'd prioritise those. So I'm not going to, they will always be must-have, they're always critical, project will fail without them. But sometimes there are other things that will influence the order things are worked in. So, I don't know, maybe you're trying to manage some dependencies or something like that. Or maybe you've got, some resourcing issues, temporary resources coming into a project. They're not going to be available till the next time box, whatever it might be. So, and then they're only going to be available for a week, whatever it might be. So actually think about prioritising your must-haves at the next level down. So within a within a time box, yeah, we know it's a must-have for the delivery, but let's call it a should-have for this time box or a could-have for this time box. Or even a won't-have, because we'll do it next time box. Yeah, so that's what I would prefer to do.
Again, a splendid presentation. The query is related to the splitting between the must-have, the should-have, and could-have.
Yep.
Now, the way I have experienced is the sponsors don't have time to have these dialogues every time because they've got a day job, they're running between 10 different things. So the way I manage it is that I already have a list of priorities set even between the must-have. So if I've got some discussions to have already, like we take back the example of I need 10 more days. So I will already have a recommendation going back to the sponsor and saying, this is what is likely to drop out. The likeliness of something in must-have to drop out is 0. It's what will drop out will always be in the could-have. So what's your view on that?
So I understand why you'd do that. Yeah. I would say, and maybe you've got, I don't know, a good business analyst or somebody like that who understands the business well and could come up with a sensible prioritization by themselves. So yeah, you can do that and then take a pre-prepared list and negotiate that pre-prepared list. That will help on a time basis. But if you think about what that means, though, it's your list. You're taking it in. There's your priorities. Yeah. So you're actually undermining a sense of ownership by the business people. So then you've got but they're busy people with a day job and all those things. So, and I was having a conversation before over coffee before we started actually. One of the things that I struggle with is sponsors who don't have the time, or senior business people that don't have the time to get involved in IT's projects, usually IT. Yeah. The whole attitude is wrong. It's not IT's project, it's your project. You're the sponsor, it's your project. You own it. Yeah, we're just here to make things happen. It's your project though. Yeah, oh well I haven't got time to do this, that and the other. Okay, well what have you got time for then? Yeah? Try and negotiate at least some time. It amazes me how, and again this was a conversation just now, so for the person I was having it with, apologies. It amazes me that a sponsor can be sponsoring a project in an organisation with a £10 million budget, but they're not available to come and make key decisions around that investment, to sort out key problems that you as PMs can't resolve. They're too busy. What? That is just nonsense, to use a polite term. It's just nonsense. Yeah? The point I was making was, if you had a windfall, £10,000, didn't know you were going to have this £10,000. You've agreed with your other half you're going to have the garden remodelled. Yeah? What are you going to do as a sponsor for this? It's your £10,000, right? You're going to phone up a landscape gardener, spend 5 minutes telling him what you want, and then say, don't bother me about it, just get it done. Yeah? That's what you're going to do, isn't it? With the £10,000 of your money. Yeah? Then you'll wait till it's finished, and then you'll decide whether you like it or not. Of course you're not. You're going to go home every night, you're going to be looking out of the window as you're taking your suit off or whatever it is. You're going to be looking out the window. What's gone on with the garden today? What's he doing? If you see stuff happening you don't like, what are you going to do? Oh, well, never mind. I commissioned him to do it. It's not my business. It's his project now. It's not mine. Of course not. You're going to do something about it. You're going to get involved. You're going to influence. You're going to make it be what you want it to be for the £10,000 of your money you're investing in your garden. Yeah? £10 million of the company's money, it's only silly money, isn't it? It's not proper money. Yes, it is proper money. Yeah? And for those people, they need to understand this. So I know it's not something, as a project manager, you can necessarily kick people to do.
I was saying that discussion can go anywhere when you're deciding remuneration and you're deciding packages and bonus, and you make decisions on £10 million of projects very easily, but then you're distributing £10,000 back into bonus, then the discussion goes a different way. So that's the money aspect of the difference when you're holding your own purse. So.
But interestingly, it should be important, shouldn't it? It just should be. Yeah. It's amazing how it isn't in some organisations, though. Any other questions?
Have you ever, as an organisation, looked at, you had the pie chart with the 46% of unused features, which is possibly out of, going back to 2002, maybe waterfall methods. Have you ever sort of compared, done sort of, well, this is what you get out of doing agile DSDM and get 10% unused features?
I don't know that Standish Group, who actually did that survey, ever repeated it, to be perfectly honest. But you can, as somebody who's managed projects and coached project teams and all that sort of stuff, I just don't understand how you would end up with all of that wasted stuff, you know, all those features, given the amount of engagement and involvement there is throughout. And especially if you're using MoSCoW and you're de-scoping the things of least importance, you know, all the time. You know, I just don't see it happening. But as far as I'm aware, there are no stats to support that. I also, to be perfectly honest, that the stats that were published by Standish Group wasn't from a huge sample size of projects either, and they were for internal business systems projects. So yeah, some people throw rocks at Standish for the way it presents statistics sometimes. So we ought to be clear about that. It's not a huge sample size.
So I was just going to say whether you could repeat the question. I could hear the back.
Okay, yep, I will do. Yep, so the question I answered was, in that instance, has there been any research done that shows whether using an agile approach does away with those stats right up front about the lots of wasted features within software? And that was a question I answered. I think somebody in the middle, yeah.
Yes, so looking back at the Bill Connolly sketch, do you have any personal experience where you've gone in and there's a sponsor, and the sponsor said, look, prioritisation, everything's a must-have, that's it, don't come to me with,
yep.
And your views on dealing with it.
Yeah, so one example I had quite early on in my freelance career, actually. I was doing some coaching for Friends Provident at the time, and the project I was coaching there, they were building a laptop-based application for their salespeople to be selling life insurance policies. And bearing in mind that my only experience with life insurance as an industry was having bought a policy, yeah, and I actually bought a policy a few months before, so that's my only experience. I was listening to this person saying, this is a must-have, this is a must-have, this is a must-have, and I was sitting there thinking, no, it's not. What I know about the business, I know that's not a must-have. But he insisted, yeah, and the project manager said to me, so we can't really use DSDM then, if everything's a must-have? And I said, no, let's give it a go. Everybody, it's a company decision. You're going to start using DSDM as an organisation. You ought to give it a go, but you prioritise. You've been in... This lady in particular, she'd been in the working for Friends Provident for sort of 9 or 10 years, so in that space. So she knew a damn sight more about it than I did. So I said, you prioritise. Do your best, to prioritise. But don't tell anybody you're doing it. Just plan on the basis of your priorities, given that he's not giving you any. Right? So we did that. And the project actually went really well. And in the right towards the end, there were a few things that were worked on, a few things that had to be discarded and all this sort of stuff. And we sat down for a post or pre-go live session with the sponsor. And the sponsor said, oh, it's a real shame that you delivered that and that, because if we'd had that and that instead, then we could have gone with it, could have gone live with it at the weekend. Oh, what a shame. Yep. And I said to him, gotcha, is what I said. It's amazing how bold you can be when you're an external person. So I said, gotcha, what do you mean? What do you mean? What do you mean? I said, look, if you had provided that guidance to the team, if you had said, we can't go live without this, but we can go live without this, what do you think they would have worked on? Would they have worked on this stuff that you didn't want, or would they have worked on the stuff you did want? Well, they'd have worked on the stuff that I wanted. Yeah, excellent. So why didn't you prioritise? Why didn't you tell the team that was the important stuff, that's what you wanted done in preference to that stuff? Oh, yeah. Went into an increment 2 for that project, phase 2. Couldn't talk him up. Oh, no, we can work around this, we can work around that. We can live with that. That's more important, but we can live without this. Brilliant. Yeah, so he learnt. Yeah, the hard way. Yeah. Because it was actually... there's because of the sort of quarterly sales cycles and everything else, they had to wait 3 months before the next opportunity to implement that. So it's quite a big hit from a business perspective. Yeah. So that's an example. You have to be a bit careful if you actually work for the organisation and say gotcha to a sponsor if they misbehave, but there you go. Any other questions on MoSCoW? Okay. Any other questions on anything else associated with DSDM that I might be able to answer for you? No? Okay. There's more food at the back. Miriam.
I have a question, if I may.
Yep.
Thinking about projects that are re-platform type projects, so you're just using the same product and you're just going to move it and lift it from a platform to another one. And for the business, the whole lift and shift is a must.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I want all that plus something else because I'm not giving anything else to the business, so really we want to give something extra. So they also add additional requirements to it. When you're trying to negotiate to understand what's truly the value of each of the features, what is truly a must and what's truly you should and could, to them, well, everything was already there, so everything should be a must. We're struggling badly to get that level of split in much of it.
Okay. So it sounds to me like there's probably some laziness that's gone on. Yeah. An example, much more recent example than my British Airways ones. I was working with a bank in the city, Daiwa Capital Markets, and they were doing what they thought was going to be a lift and shift type project. They needed to replace their old mainframe, right? They hadn't invested in it for nearly a decade because, you know, they had intended to replace it. They'd failed two projects. Two projects had failed to replace it, by the way, in those 10 years, and they wanted to have another go. The problem they had was the number of people that understood it were diminishing. I think there was something like 3 people left in the organisation. One of those had, you know, sort of problems with stress. Another one was retiring, and the last man standing. Don't think there was anything wrong with him, but you know, that was it really. So they didn't have the capability to keep their mainframe software up to date. So we really must replace it properly this time. So, okay, so what do you need your new system to do then? Oh, we just want it to do everything the old system does. And we've got these extra things that we'd like it to do as well. Yeah, exactly that argument. No, you don't. You really don't want it to do everything the old system does. Yeah, because I know for a fact that you've got one person in your department's job is to take something off that screen over there, put it into a spreadsheet, process it, and enter it into that screen over there. Yeah, and that was a regulatory change that happened 5 years ago. Yeah, that you had to do this, processing or this calculation or whatever. You're doing it in a spreadsheet. Yeah. So what you're telling me is you want to continue with that business inefficiency when we give you a nice shiny new bit of tin and some new bits of wire, do you? Well, no, it'd be good if you could sort that out. Yeah, I'm sure it would. Yeah. So we actually had a conversation with the CEO. It was the biggest project in IT IT project the bank had ever done. Yeah. We had the conversation, myself and the person that became the program manager, and we said, please don't treat this as a technology project. It's not a technology project. Yeah, you spent the last 10 years putting in place manual workarounds because you didn't have the resource or you were scared to touch your fragile mainframe and all this sort of stuff. I'll go back to the very first training course I had in DSDM. The person that trained me said, and to my team, said, first thing you need to understand, he said, is there is no such thing as an IT project. IT projects do not exist. There are only business change projects. Yeah, because actually, that's what it's all about. Yeah, IT enabled change. Yeah, so you want to do something, you want IT supporting it. Yeah, you want to do something better. You're going to need to change to exploit change in technology and all this sort of stuff, right? Makes sense. I used that argument. I said, you don't want to do this. Yeah, you need to take the opportunity to think about making this more efficient. We had a brilliant business visionary, somebody who actually understood how an operation at a bank could be more efficient, right? So he was our visionary. He was the person that really understood this. The sponsor effectively was a CFO. He bought into it because we sold it to the CEO, the COO, that you need to take this as an opportunity to change the way your business works. They actually reduced the number of people in their operations department by half. By half. So this was a technology project, replacing old tin with new tin, purely to reduce risk. had a 31.5% internal rate of return based on business efficiency. So that's the sort of argument you want to have. Rather than have the argument about which of these features can we balance off in a MoSCoW way, you need to actually say, forget what's there at the moment, we need to prioritise that as well. Yeah? So go through all the features in your current system and tell us what you must, should, could have. The answer is they don't know what the existing system does. The people that know most what the existing system does are probably the people in IT that support it. Yeah? Well, if business people don't know what the system does, how can they know whether it's a must-have or not? Yeah? Invest in the analysis for what you've got, and then you'll find loads of shoulds and coulds will drop out of existing functionality. Yeah? You can pick something trivial, and you say, if we couldn't replicate that in our lift and shift, if we couldn't replicate that little bit of feature there, is the whole project a disaster? We can't do the whole project, we have to cancel it. No, of course not. Yeah? And if they say, no, well, we might be able to live without, pick another one, and another one, and another one, and another one. Pick 20. Yeah? And then you say, see what I mean? Yeah? We need to do this properly. Yeah? And then you'll get proper conversation around MoSCoW.
Isn't it incredible that every question...
You what, sorry?
Isn't it incredible that every question that we made to you,
Yep.
and some of the presentation is not about deliverables, it's stakeholder management.
Yep. It is. Yeah. I haven't got the slide immediately accessible, but there are a whole set of values around Agile. There's 4 values. The first one says we value individuals and interactions over processes and tools. Yeah. And that's exactly what we're talking about.
Projects made by people, to people, for
Yep.
people.
Yep. Absolutely. And that is the essence of what makes Agile work. It's about engaging in proper conversation.
Are there any techniques for stakeholder management?
Techniques for stakeholder management. Yes. Yeah. So, and this is a tough one because people quite often don't like it, right? But the answer is transparency. Yeah. Make it absolutely clear what's going on. Yeah, don't try and hide it. Don't try and pretty it up. Make it absolutely clear. Pain, blood, guts, whatever. Yeah. People quite often see, like it's like the swan or the duck, isn't it, on the surface with the legs going like this underneath. Yeah. Make it clear. Put the camera underneath. Say, look how these legs are going. That's how the swan moves serenely across the lake. Because all this stuff's happening. Yeah. And if you actually expose the pain, and this is what happened, that Friends Provident project I was talking about, where not everything was delivered. One thing the sponsor got to understand, because he was engaged, was how hard the team were working. He knew there was none of this slacking off the last Friday afternoon of the month, going down the pub, all that sort of stuff. He knew the team were there working passionately on the project, because he was close enough to see it. So he knew it wasn't a case of, oh, we didn't get it done because we couldn't be bothered, or because we were lazy, or because we'd rather be in the pub. Yeah, it was clear and transparent. That made the shift from the gotcha to I get it, let's do it differently much better. So transparency. Some organisations, the last one I was talking about, with the guy that says, oh, you just have to work in dog years then, right? Wouldn't work there. That was a macho culture where actually how hard you banged the desk and shouted was more important than the reality and the real success of the company. Sad, but true. That's my assessment as an outsider. And I won't name the company because I might get shot. Yeah, but that was, that's the thing. Make it transparent and get people to understand. Most people will. Most people are invested in an organisation, yeah, because that's the way it works, Anybody with a career in an organisation that's been there for a while, it gets into you, doesn't it? And usually senior people have been there, doing that sort of thing for a while. They just forget. Yeah, they just get used to this sort of petulant child having a tantrum type way of working, and they need a slap, however nicely and gently that's done and everything else, just to, oh God, I haven't got any kids, by the way, so I don't go around brutalising them, just in case you're wondering. But yeah, it's,
You mentioned renewable subset. Does these things still use the term minimum viable product?
Interestingly, DSDM never used the term minimum viable product, as far as I'm aware. It only ever used minimum usable subset. If you're getting into minimum viable product, you need to look at the features and understand what makes those viable. One thing is true is if you're launching a product to the market and there's competition and all that sort of stuff, you can't launch something that's half-baked, that doesn't stand up against the competition. It would be silly to do that, right? So what that says is, even if technically it works, that ain't good enough, yeah? And that's quite right to think that. What you need to do is need to understand that what makes a product viable is flexible, yeah? So if you were to say, look, it's got to do nearly everything that our competitor product, the competing products do, potentially, fine, yeah? Deal with that in the should-haves. Keep yourself your could-haves, your 25% contingency, and you will deliver the minimum viable product. Yeah, there might be one or two things missing. Yeah, but one of those or two of those individually won't be a disaster. Yeah, there'll be an inconvenience. There'll be we need to tell the guys how to sell around that thing that didn't get done in time, or whatever it might be. Yeah, so but treat viable and usable, something that works as different. Technically, yes. But they are very, very rare. You what, sorry? What I would do in that circumstance is I would use traditional contingency. Yeah, you'd have to say, let's put the 25% on the end. Yeah, but I would still use time boxing. Yeah, I still have a target date, which is that date that is the full beaker. Yeah, and plan as if that was an absolute given. Then if you're de-scoping things, yeah, you're not de-scoping them to won't haves, you're de-scoping them into the we will do them before we go live pot. So you have a couple of time boxes to do that. Yeah, it isn't as good, but with the discipline, you can still maintain that. Yeah. So, but do you know what? I've come across lots of projects where at the top level everything is a must-have. Yeah. So, I'll use an insurance example again. We must be able to provide a quote. We must be able to sell a policy. We must be able to make changes to that policy mid-term. We must be able to allow a claim. We must be able to renew that policy. Yeah. So all of those at the top level are must-haves. Yeah. When you dig down into the how do we achieve that, that's where you'll find some wiggle room, if you like. That's where you'll find, there'll be 10 different ways you could sell a policy. Yeah, so work that out and make those, prioritise at that level. Any more for any more? Okay.
If you have a very uncompromising business ambassador, and you feel perhaps that they're being too
Zealous, whatever it might be, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And you don't really want to undermine that person at all by going to how can you manage this?
So what I'd do first of all is I'd go back to the vision, yeah, and I would challenge that person directly on whether they are compliant with the business vision that somebody more senior than them that's empowered them to work at the detail level with you on your project, yeah, challenge them on that basis. Yeah, first of all, that may well change their opinion, make them a bit less zealous. You can then say, well, why don't we get the business visionary involved in this then? Because quite often their position won't be irrational. They may be afraid to let go, to let something by, in case the visionary's upset with them. Well, okay, let's get them involved. let's have that reality chat rather than you to me. Well, let's do it you to me, but let's get him involved as well, because, you know, he's the one that knows this and is going to have to deal with the consequences. It's not right that you as a business ambassador should have to deal with that. Yeah, so empowerment is great. Yeah, understanding and doing a bit of work at the beginning about what happens if we have this conversation. You know, what happens when we're having a conversation one day and you say, no, it's an absolute must-have and I don't think it is. Yeah, what are we going to do about that? Yeah, would it be okay if we disagreed to go and talk to the business visionary? Yeah, and in the sort of cool, dispassionate, unheated way you can make that sort of decision, it then becomes a, yeah, of course you could. No problem. Okay. Then when it happens, you can say, actually, this is one of those circumstances which we talked about 3 months ago, right? Yeah. Let's go and call on the business visionary. So actually thinking about how you head these issues off before you start is a really good thing to do. But again, transparency is it. And you know what? You are always going to find people who aren't the right people to do that job. Yeah, we know that, don't we? You know, and you've probably heard the term, if you can't change the people, i.e. change their behaviour, change the people, get them out, get somebody else in to do it. Yeah, because what's worse? A project going off the rails or dealing with that confrontation, to use your kind words, undermining that person. Yeah, well, sorry, that's what it takes to deliver the project. That's what we have to do. But you try and do it nicely first.
So when you were talking about contingency,
yep.
I guess the contingency really is one form of managing the risks.
Yep.
How does kind of traditional risk management align with the approach, DSDM approach, or the MoSCoW approach?
Yeah, so to be honest, if you read the DSDM handbook, it doesn't talk much about risk. Yeah, it talks about risk in the sense of this is a way you can overcome risks with more traditionally based projects. So what I would say is the sort of the classic stuff around management of risk is as valid in an agile project as it is in a traditional project. Yeah, so do the same sorts of things. Keep your eye open for risk. Keep the team's eye open for risk. Yeah, have conversations about it. You've got a great opportunity at the end of every time box as a project manager. Yeah, once you've been there, you've seen the demo, what the team's built, everything else. Going into a retrospective, you can actually say, has anybody spotted anything, by the way? Has anything happened in that time box? Might be introducing risk later on. You've got the opportunity on every couple of weeks to revisit revisit risk. Yeah, so it's the management of it's no different. The hooks into the reality of the process are better, though. Okay, I think that's it, folks. I'll be around if you've got any more questions one-to-one afterwards. Thank you very much.